evening, everybody. All the DFA members, welcome to the web series that the DFA board are putting on. Special thank you to Alette and Amilcar and the DocShare team for doing these incredible webinars that they do each week. This week we are speaking about NGOs, collaborating and working with NGOs. And I'm your host this evening. My name is Karin Slater. I'm a documentary filmmaker of the last 35 years. I am an invited member of the Academy and the judge on the Oscars in the documentary branch. And I've served as co-chair in the Documentary Filmmakers Association. And yeah, with us this evening, we have a fantastic group of people who work in different capacities in the NGO space. So I'm going to introduce them. Excuse me, as I read their bios. Number one, we have Jacqueline van Meengarden. She's an independent director and producer and communications practitioner with over 20 years of experience in storytelling, from nonfiction filmmaking to multimedia visual theatre. She was awarded a Commonwealth Vision Award in 2007 and has produced climate justice campaign content for 360.org in Africa and produces factual content for the local broadcasters, SABC, and has directed several short documentary films. Her first documentary, Nosy Manor, 2011, about communities vulnerable to climate change in Madagascar, inspired her to share similar strong African stories about environmental and climate justice. She co-directed in the impact and is the impact producer on Temperature Rising, and is currently developing Chikukwa Custodian, sorry about the pronunciation there, a documentary set in Zimbabwe about indigenous knowledge and climate resilience. She's co-director and media cooperative of Mycelium Media Co-Lab in Cape Town. So that's Jacqueline. Do you want to say a quick hello, Jacqueline?
Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone here. Names that I know and faces.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jacqueline. Next, we have, let's see, Matuba hasn't arrived. Let's have Connie. Connie, can you give us a wave? There's Connie from Women, Connie Nagaya. She's a strategic media coordinator at Women African Alliance and a development communications specialist. Over the last 20 years, she's worked as a production manager and TV and documentary producer on national and international productions. She's led media and public relations campaigns for local and international governments and civil society organizations, and has covered news stories of national and regional interest for local and international broadcasters. Connie focuses on media work with a strong social justice lens in the development sector, combining storytelling, strategic communications, and advocacy to amplify marginalized voices and drive social change. She's passionate about impact-driven media and brings a deep production expertise and campaign experience to every project. Welcome, Connie. You want to say a quick hello to your audience?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. I said hello, everybody.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you for being here. Then we have Margaret Mapondera, who's also from Women. She's a communications and media coordinator and has supported feminist movements across Southern Africa and around the world for over 7 years, facilitating creative ways to document human experience and struggles for justice. Before coming to Women, she worked at Just Associates, a global feminist movement building organizations committed to amplifying the voice of visibility and human rights defenders and their movements worldwide. They've both worked at Women, award-winning film Women Hold Up the Sky, which has been shown internationally, garnering several accolades, including winning the 2020 National Arts Festival Gold Ovation Award. So we're going to see a bit of that trailer coming up, so hang tight. That should be really a good one to watch. Then we have with us also Kim Hendricks. Hello, Kim. Can you show us who you are there?
Hello, everybody.
So Kim is a person we need to know as filmmakers. She's a chartered accountant and senior lecturer at Mill Park Education, and she teaches taxation to aspire chartered accountants. She believes that the environments we create in classrooms, workplaces, and communities significantly shape how people learn, grow, and contribute. Her interests lie in education, social impact, and supporting others to navigate complex challenges with clarity, integrity, and confidence. She is drawn to spaces where purpose and people come first and where learning is shared. Guided by curiosity and care and deep respect for collaboration, she values connection and thoughtful engagement. Outside of her work, she finds joy in simplicity and creating and connecting with people, movement, and the outdoors. So she's a senior lecturer and an accountant. Welcome, Kim. Thank you for being here with us this evening. I think I'm certainly interested to hear what you have to tell us about how to get our books in order and how we can use this NGO space to help us with our tax. So thank you. And last but not least, Miki Redlinghuys, who needs no real introduction. She is a documentary filmmaker who believes film has the power to bring positive change. She's a co-founder of Plexus Films, consults as impact producer, serves as program director for the UCT Sunshine Cinema Film Impact Short Course, mentors the Durban Film Art Access Program, and a co-director of the Climate Story Lab, Southern Africa. In 2018, she initiated the DFA Doc Love screenings in Cape Town, which have grown into the countrywide film screening programs aimed at social engagement through film. Most she loves being in the world with a camera, which is why she spent years filming Mother City, which is currently screening at festivals worldwide and running social impact campaign. So welcome, Miki.
Hi, thanks, Karin. Hello,
And I think
everybody.
let's start with you, Miki, since your mic is open. If you're ready to start, are you okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, great. Yeah, maybe just start to give us a little bit of background of your experience working with NGOs, how it works for you, and also, of course, your latest film, Mother City. Be interested to know how that went working with an NGO and how you navigated that process.
Okay, thanks, Karin, and thanks everybody for coming in the evening to a webinar about film. It's really incredible that people set aside time like this to spend together, and I really appreciate it. So I think I just want to pause for a moment and reflect on the news today of Showmax shutting down. And, there was a lot of conversation on the DFA group about how many jobs and livelihoods and storytellers are going to be impacted by this decision, which is honestly a financially motivated decision. And I think that with the world, the broadcast and streamer world shrinking, from my perspective, for opportunities for documentary filmmakers, especially documentary filmmakers that want to work making films on themes of social justice or environmental justice, I think those opportunities seem to be shrinking. And we're going to look at other places for support and financing for our films. And obviously one of those places are NGOs. And sometimes it's us going to an NGO looking for a partnership and looking for funding. And sometimes NGOs come to us and ask us to make a film for them. And over the years of working in making films for broadcasters, there's been a lot of opportunities to do smaller films for NGOs, but over many years, it's almost like that has grown bigger where the broadcast world has grown smaller, for me, in any case. And I'm actually going to talk, Karin, if you don't mind, I'm going to talk about This Land, which was a film that I made between 2016 and between 2015 and 2017, and it really rolled out mostly in 2018, because this was really the first film that was entirely funded. There was no broadcast funder, no national film and video funding. It was entirely funded by an organization called the Land and Accountability Research Center, which is based at UCT Law Center. And it's an organization that works around land rights, specifically land rights of rural people in the former homelands. And they came to us and asked us to make a film around a particular issue around recognizing the land rights of people that don't have title deeds as per the former homelands. So this film is entirely funded by LARC, but the first thing I want to say is often when you get NGO funding or organizational funding to make a film, it's not on a par with giant, with commercial film budgets. It's much smaller. And so you do put quite a lot into it off your own back. There are many, many, many unaccounted for hours, and you get involved because you care deeply about the issue. So for me, that was definitely a case. I looked at a lot of the research material. I cared deeply about the issue because it dealt with small rural communities losing their land, losing their livelihoods, having their water contaminated through mining companies coming in. And so you know that you're going to put in more money than more time than what they're going to be able to fund you for, but you have to make that decision from the start if you're prepared to do that. And then what we agreed was that there would be a shared ownership. So it wasn't like they were going to commission us and we make the film and then it's theirs. It was a shared ownership between Plexus Films and LARC. The next thing that I think is very important is sometimes when NGOs, and I say this with all love to the NGO representatives in the room, come in and ask us as creatives to make a film, they've got a lot of information they want to communicate. And I think, and especially sometimes if people are coming in from the academic space and the research space, they're very sort of text and information driven. And so you have to talk through the process of, this is a creative tool. And the reason you're coming to me as a filmmaker is because you want a different tool. You don't want an academic paper. You don't want a workshop. You want a film. So let's trust each other where you have the knowledge and the connections, and you're funding this project, but trust us as the film team to know how to tell a good story. And they were just incredible to work with because the producer there, Brendan Boyle, had come from journalism. I mean, the researcher who was their producer for the film had come from the world of journalism into that research NGO space and understood the importance of a good narrative. And so we were given a lot of flexibility in terms of just being able to get on and tell the best possible story. The next thing I think that was important to negotiate once it came to actually making the film and the final edits and the information, the on-screen, and there's a lot of give and take that has to happen here, is not all the information has to be in the film. This is something I like to say up front, and I keep having to come back to it, is that the film is one tool for communication in a series of tools that organization may have. So you use the film to hook the audience, to make them care, to engage them in the topic. And then you share the detail in your website and your publications and your workshops. And so sometimes people want to put everything into the film, and you've got to kind of strip it away and stick to story, because that is what film ultimately is story, right? So maybe I'm just wondering if everybody here knows the film, if I should share the trailer. Not
Yes,
wanting
share
to
the
take up
trailer.
too much time. Okay, should I?
Yes.
Can you
You've
hear
seen
it?
that Amakosi are selling land to business people, mining companies, giving land to foreigners to build malls. We are trying to show not only the chief, even the king, that we are the landowners here.
Sasisizala ngokuxoshwa ababelima amahlathi.
Indaba yokuthi bayahamba la ngabona nje imoto ifika la ingena Zimba kwathiwa imayini la ihamba manje.
Ukuthi batholani kasasa babizwa kanjalo wathi hayi kunomcebo lapha phansi mina no engizosuswa. Iphakethe lodwa likaZipho akhipha imvilophi akhipha imali ayifake emvilophini ayinikeze inkosi.
Lo nto umthetho uzovele nje uqhamuka usuzoshintsha imingcele. Yabo nje babe mingale manje bafuna nale misi okungekho nje. Indlela ukuthi idayiseke.
Athola umbiko la ngomunye owasebela kusho ukuthi umuntu owayethengiwe owayeyinkalo uthiwa akazobulala la.
Nami sengibuye ngiphile ngokucala. Ube ngathi yini? Ngilale njengonogwayi. Imayini niyibiza ngentuthuko. Imayini is a mass eviction project.
Ngoba kuyokwazeka ukuthi safe ukuthi imayini asiyifuni endaweni esakhiwe.
Phansi ngobhalo phansi. Uzohlakazela. Ngezwakala ngithi bani? Hey, usalapha man. Nobody can fight for us except us.
I just wanted to give people a sense of what the film was about that I was talking about. And then that's not the end of the story. If I have a little bit more time, I can just talk about how to leverage the relationship with that organization to pull in other NGOs who could support the film. Should I
Yes,
go?
Go ahead, yes.
So obviously the film had a very specific plan, and we ran an impact campaign, and for that we needed funding. And so by virtue of the fact that we had this partnership with LARC that had a lot of credibility and networks and relationships, as a film team who I then also became the impact producer of the film, we could collaborate with their collaborators. And so the one thing kind of leads to the other. The Bertha Foundation had funded LARC to do a lot of things, including a film. So the film had, in an indirect way, been funded by Bertha. This meant that we could go back to them with an impact proposal and ask if they could fund that part of the process, because they generally only give impact funding to their own projects. So this was, in a way, one of their projects. And so we could access that support. We wanted to take the films to communities that were under-resourced, that didn't have access to cinema and electricity. And it was still the early days of Sunshine Cinema, and I'd seen one of their first ever screenings at Gugsetebe, and I contacted Sidel and said, we have this thing we want to do. We'd love to have mobile cinemas. It's the only way we can actually reach the communities that are impacted, the mining affected communities. And she said, well, they'd just been supported by the Bertha Foundation with their first sunboxes, and she's willing to give them to us for free for 6 months for the duration of our campaign. And so there was this lovely network, the synergy of having like-minded objectives. And so they gave us the equipment, which was wonderful. And then we needed actual money to be able to travel and send screening facilitators out there and to create resources and have conversations. And I knew that the Nelson Mandela Foundation had a focus on land in that particular year, and that there was also an existing relationship between the Land and Accountability Research Center and NMF. And so that created a gateway to speaking to the Nelson Mandela Foundation to get them on board to support the impact campaign. And so really what I want to say is working with NGOs and organizations is not just about having funding for the film, but it's about building sustainable relationships and partnerships and networks, and seeing where there are connections, where the one organization has a similar objective, and could they come on board as a partner further down the line to support the ongoing work of the project. So I spoke about This Land. I know you asked me to talk about Mother City, but in a way it was the This Land process and that relationship and that learning that led me, that also inspired the way I worked with partners in Mother City. So I thought it's good to talk about that one.
Okay, great. Thank you, Miki. That's excellent. Sounds amazing. Yeah, and I love the film. So yeah, congratulations on that. Then let's speak to Connie and Margaret. Could you, either one of you, start with your work with women as and how you work in the NGO space? Because you're an interesting combination of being filmmakers yourselves and working with feminism. Just explain to me how it works, because I'm not quite understanding.
All right. So I think I'll give Maggie how to describe our work as women,
Okay.
and then I'll explain the filmmaking side and storytelling side.
So Women African Alliance is a pan-African eco-feminist organization And we work with partners in 17 countries across the continent in West and Central Africa, East Africa, and Southern Africa. And our main focus of our work is supporting women in communities that are being impacted by extractivism in its different forms. So that can be mining companies, it can be forests, big agriculture, it can be mega dams, and other big mega extractive projects that are destructive and that are displacing communities from their land, and that are basically imposing a lot of violence and other problems on these communities. And women are, in general, the front line of that. And I think in terms of our film, Women Hold Up the Sky, our main purpose in making the film was how to expose the violence of extractivism, and specifically how extractivism is impacting women, and to really amplify and make visible these stories that are so often hidden from the mainstream from an explicitly feminist perspective. But I'll hand over to Connie to speak more specifically about our process with that film. And hi, Sharon,
Margaret.
who is actually the filmmaker, one of the filmmakers we worked with, is in the audience.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
So,
Hi, Sharon.
yeah, so with Women Hold Up the Sky and Woman, we launched in 2013. And as the organization grew bigger, we were tired of just having the content and the work and the research and narrative reports win a report, We wanted to show and tell and make women's stories and testimonies and experiences come alive. And so everybody's now producing their own content. They don't need people like us, filmmakers, directors, they're producing their own content. And so we thought it's time to make a film. We'd worked in so many different countries across the continent. And so we then thought of doing Women Hold Up the Sky. It had taken like 5 years in development and research and pre-prod. And then until we landed on 3 sites, which was Nigeria, Uganda, and South Africa, looking at mining specifically and women in mining impacted communities. So I don't know if we can share the trailer now. Is that okay?
Nowhere is this more clear than resource-rich Africa, where the costs are carried by women. We visit the oil fields of Uganda, the Grand Inga dams of the DRC, and the coal mines of South Africa to witness women's fight to protect the planet from destruction by empires of greed.
Empeleni ngabe baqonde nje ukuthi sife ngoba akekho umuntu ongahlala emhlabeni oguge njengalo.
Pero develop beto to sa beto develop mango yina nini parce que na beto eto mona beto ba develop mango ikele fe
kulinka ukamujo kurwana nedodo kuba endodo yonkoto wekusangiriza hanu iwe nkoko kali ekuse kukuruba tahone.
With their resistance, African women live our best hope for the future. They hold up the sky for us all.
Sharon, would you like to continue before we come back to Connie?
Yes, sure. So, I mean, as Connie mentioned, it was many years in the making, and it was quite a protracted process. So, what happened was that the process began under Connie's leadership and guidance on the producing side, and a filmmaker from the UK was brought on board. And she directed the KZN part of the shoot. And then Connie needed to move on to something else. And so, in a sense, I inherited the production from her at that point for a period of time of must have been about like 2 or 3 years, where we then worked with women, but also their partners in the different countries. So we worked with their partner organization in the DRC to identify. In fact, initially there were thoughts about filming in Nigeria and even Niger at one point, but then the final decision was then made to make the third case study in the DRC. And just around the sort of logistics of filming there at that time, we went through quite a protracted process of finding a filmmaker local to the DRC to work with to direct the shoot. And so we partnered him, and in fact, Nelson Makengo is the filmmaker. He's now subsequently had a very illustrious career, and yeah, I mean, he's done really, really well. He was already a filmmaker there, but he's done incredibly well since then, which is great to see. And so we sort of, went through a lot of sort of work with him in terms of briefing him around the story and the treatment of the film, etc. And then he went to the dam area itself with the partners on the ground, and they worked together on the shoot. And then in the meantime, the part of the Uganda part of the film was shot by Yaba went to Uganda to direct that part of the film, and then by the time we got to filming the DRC part, there'd been some new developments in Uganda, and it was felt that there needed to be more content and around what the developments had been there with the oil drilling in that part of the country. And so I then went with Liam, we filmed sort of the rest of the Uganda part of the story. And then we came back and we then worked very closely with Woman, with Maggie, with Sam, etc., to construct the edit, to actually do the editing part. And then Connie then, came back into the process once the film was made, and has been doing a lot of work around, with it subsequent to that. So there was a lot of collaboration, and it was an amazing experience to work with the organization. They're really nice to work with, and yeah, I mean, that's probably enough for now.
Thank you, Sharon. Connie, would you like to add to that, or Maggie?
I think it was important for Woman for us to present a counter narrative to mainstream narratives with it going, and also it was very important that we gave women a voice to tell their own stories. So it wasn't so much participatory filmmaking, but in terms of the approach as an organization, and even with our next film, it is going to be very much more participatory in its approach.
Fantastic. And where can we see the film? It looks fantastic.
It's on YouTube, and Vimeo. I'll put the link in. You'll see all our content there. But really, as a feminist organization that's rooted in climate justice and women's rights and women's agency, it was important also that we searched high and low for an African woman director. We were very clear about that. And that took a lot of time, because we wanted somebody that had experience, that kind of matched our political alignment. That was also really important. And so if you work with filmmakers as an NGO, that would be critical. The other thing that we did is also not just showed it on the film circuit. Internationally, it's been shown on every continent, but also it was really important to take the films to communities, in villages, in towns, to have community cinemas, and have, conversations, discussions afterwards. And that had the greatest, deepest impact to people seeing themselves and their stories and struggles reflected.
Fantastic. Wow. Amazing. Margaret, do you have something you'd like to add?
Sharon and Connie have covered most of it, but just to add, I think it was really important for us as women to try and work in a different way, and to not be extractive in the way that we were making the film. And so being really mindful that the women in the film are not presented as passive subjects, but that they have, their full agency, and you can really emphasizing the power of their resistance and their organizing in really incredibly difficult conditions, but also thinking about things like safety and security. In the context of the DRC, that became a really big issue where we weren't allowed to film in the area where the big Inga Dam is, because there's security forces and monitoring all the time. And yeah, the DRC is its own very special animal. And also finding ways to work in, I think Sharon mentioned working in partnership and working with local fixers, many of whom were from our partner organizations. And so they know the communities, they have built a relationship of trust with the communities. And so making sure to really use those kinds of resources that are already there with the NGO partner to be really effective. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you. It sounds like quite a intense production. So many countries, so many issues. I mean, mining is not to be played with. They've got a lot of power. So those are two films that deal with mining and communities affected by it. It's Miki's film and Woman's film. So thank you guys for sharing that. We're going to move on to Jacqueline from Maiden Garden. Are you there, Jacqueline?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone here listening in on this. I guess a lot of my work that I've done over my career has mostly been with NGOs. All and it's a lot of it has been short form storytelling. So NGOs either have approached me or approached the sort of the cooperative that I work with and said, we want to tell a story about our project, our initiative, or I've approached an NGO and said, I've got this idea. So most of the work that I've done has been, as Miki says, taking the information and finding a way to make it into story that an organization can use for their reporting, that they can use for their fundraising. So that's most of the work that I've done. And it's been across the range, mostly social and environmental work, working with a film I did in 2010 with Conservation International in Madagascar. And that was after visiting Madagascar, approaching them and saying, we think this is really important. And then they gave the funds to do the film, and then they used it and rolled it out. And then so 4 years ago, I started working with Anita Kana and Riha Desai on what is now known as Temperature Rising. It had a very different name in the beginning. And that film looks at the climate crisis in Southern Africa and climate justice activists in this region and what they're doing to push for change. So Temperature Rising is the film that I was going to talk about here. I can show the trailer, and I was going to share a little bit about working with NGOs in the impact campaign. So let me share the trailer.
If we continue on this reckless, suicidal path that we're on, we will be gone as a species.
Floods, droughts, damage of people's livelihoods. It's just the beginning.
The people that have contributed least to the problem are the ones that are paying the first and most brutal price.
And today they are still colonizing us by bringing their destructive projects to our countries.
I am a freedom fighters child. This is my calling. There's a level of joy and excitement when I see young people mobilizing. We need everybody.
And this generation.
What will it take for the people in power to wake up?
South Africa doesn't give a damn about the way the people are affected. All that matters to them are profits. Our government does not have the right to decide what's going to happen to our resources. I'm not afraid of intimidation. I'm not afraid of having a gun to my head. I only fear the future that has been taken away from my children.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Powerful.
So here's another film about mining and people fighting against the great powers. And so we followed three different climate justice activists in the film, and each of them are connected to an NGO that they work with. Gabriel works with Project 90 and the African Climate Alliance, where he was then. Kumi Naidu, he's worked, most South Africans know him, he's worked with many NGOs, but now he's with the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And then Ina, who's from Namibia, she works with Fridays for Future in Windhoek. So we worked with these three different protagonists, but they're all working in an NGO space themselves and in the climate movements. And so the story was, how do we support the work that they're doing, and how do we support to build climate movements within this region, within South Africa? That was kind of the main aim. And very importantly, we really wanted the film that we were going to make to be a tool that NGOs and organizations in this region could use as a tool for their advocacy. That was a very important part of how we were thinking about it. So it did screen at some festivals, it was at Encounters, and it's been at some international festivals, but that really wasn't the main aim. It was like, how does this film work as a movement building tool? So I wanted to just share, I've got this other presentation that kind of just gives some visuals to what I'm talking about. Tell me if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. So this film, I was a co-director on Temperature Rising with Anita Kana and Rihad Desai. So there were three of us, which was an interesting process in and of itself, working as a co-director. And we finished it at the end of 2023. There's the poster, and the aim really was to highlight climate impact in this region, because we realized and saw that there's very little climate storytelling from Africa, from Southern Africa, and we wanted to highlight solutions, and we wanted to highlight what the activists were doing. It sort of evolved. We actually worked with women right in the beginning to brainstorm who would we bring in, who would be a potential protagonist. So right from the beginning, we were working with NGOs, getting ideas, getting input of who they know on the ground, who's doing different work. And that process was really valuable in helping us find the right people for telling the story. So the impact campaign that we sort of rolled out in 2024 and 2025. And for the first year, the focus was really on how do we build the movements and how do we get people across South Africa to understand what the climate crisis is about, and also using our sort of storytelling as this form of activism. Can a film shift people's perceptions? How do we change behavior around this? Because what we realized in doing some of the research is that there's very little, the climate literacy in our country is really low. So that was the sort of main aim of the impact campaign. And we worked with a number of NGOs, but two of the sort of main ones, we first partnered with the Climate Justice Coalition and 350.org, which is a climate justice organization. They're global, but they have a sort of Africa department, and they were they have already had a campaign ongoing on how to get these sort of stories to different organizations, how to build movements, how to get people to understand what the just energy transition is. I'm just going through some of these slides because not all of it's relevant. And we created a series of screening workshops where we basically took the film to mining impacted communities, to working class communities, and people who are already in some kind of organizing, and showed the film in a context where there was always a discussion, there was always people could ask questions, and there was always group work where people could discuss how they were involved, how they could get involved, and also giving a number of demands that people could discuss, talk about, and then endorse. So 350.org were one of our main partners on that. And we hosted workshops in a number of places in like 4 different provinces. And then out of that, realized, actually, what do we need to do? We needed to make a cut down of the film because some of the international story wasn't relevant to South Africans. So we made a shorter version, and we adapted some of the research we were doing, and then took it and then partnered with Sunshine Cinema, who we've also just mentioned before. And because of their mobile cinema screening project that they have, they've got these youth ambassadors all over the country and all over the region. And so we could train them in specifically understanding climate justice, a lot of the topics that they maybe hadn't actually come across before. So we trained them, and then they hosted screenings in the places that they work. So that was a really powerful partnership, because it's working with existing partners who are already working in different spaces. So a lot of the Sunshine Cinema ambassadors, they've done these sort of screening facilitation courses that they've been trained, but we gave them specific topics and ideas to talk about, and a guide on how to talk about these issues in their communities where they were working. So often it's done in a local language, it's done by a person who knows the community, and so we were not coming in to kind of host some of the screenings. It's done by people who understand what kind of conversations are really important. So that partnership was really important. And another aspect this was kind of the research that we did around this, was we did pre and post screening surveys, which is quite amazing. I don't know if many people have done that, if you're trying to understand the impact of your film, but having outcomes from people saying what they understand about climate change, what they understand about the importance and the urgency before and after the film was pretty incredible. So this is just some of the stats of like people who knew nothing about it at all. Things shifted quite a lot in after watching the film. People's understanding what it's, how climate change is linked to greenhouse gases, and a lot of the sort of the technical terms, decarbonization, fair finance. There's a lot of wordings that sort of gets thrown around, and the film gave people a lot of deeper understanding how they could be involved, and realizing that the climate crisis is actually part of a deeper and wider systemic issue, and that it's not separate to people's issues of access to land, water, people dealing with poverty in their own sort of spaces. So that was amazing, and this work we could only do in partnership with NGOs like Sunshine and like organizations who are already working in mining affected communities in spaces where they know the people themselves. So I think that's kind of the really important thing that I think I would want to just stress, is that working with NGOs, it's really finding where they're already working, what they're already doing, and then finding how a film can benefit them in the work that they're already doing. So 2024, we did the local sort of campaign. Over 1,600 people saw the film and participated in these workshops. And then in 2025, we sort of did a wider global reach, and it was used in different academic spaces and obviously conferences and workshops, and also some global climate justice organizations used the film to share ahead of the different COPs, the Conference of the Party, big conferences, the climate conferences that happen at the end of the year. So it's it's, I mean, I guess, yeah, that's what I was just saying. It's finding where your film aligns with what people are doing. And that's kind of, in this impact campaign that we did, that was where it worked really well. I think I'll stop there for now. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jacqueline. It seems that there's such a big correlation between NGO work and impact campaigns. They seem to really dovetail nicely. Just listening to the three of you there, the different organizations and films, and how you use each other's power and strengths, to get the film into unusual places. So yeah, fabulous. Thank you, Jacqueline. Kim, I haven't forgotten about you. I think as accountants, you can listen to all these stories and maybe give us some tips from all the different people doing different work. So I'm going to move on to Matuba. Matuba, are you there? We haven't met yet.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. My name is Matuba Masachi, and I'm from The Other Foundation. That's our name, The Other Foundation. We're based here in Johannesburg. And we are a community foundation that supports LGBTI and ally groups across 13 Southern African countries. And when it comes to filmmaking, we fund work that advances public voice and visibility of LGBTI people. As well as advocacy for policy and legal reform. As you would know, that in some of the 13 countries that we work in, LGBTI people are criminalized, and we also support work that advances movement building and alliance strengthening, as well as safety and security for activists. And filmmaking is supported when it serves these goals here at the Other Foundation. And the entry points for filmmakers, and maybe some of them are in this meeting. We have a pathway that will be a participatory grant making or an open call, where once a year we issue an open call for grant applications, and applications are reviewed by LGBTI activists and allies who we call peer reviewers, who recommend proposal for funding. And that's where filmmakers will be applying. We also have strategic grants, and in some cases we proactively identify strategic opportunities, which include film projects that align with our advocacy goals. And these are less common and usually initiated by the foundation directly. So perhaps some of you will wonder if we have ever commissioned work, and we occasionally commission filmmakers directly for specific projects, like documenting convenings, producing advocacy content, and this happens through our procurement processes and not necessarily grant. And many of our grantees who are LGBTI organizations produce their own films or partner with filmmakers and funding flows to the organization, which then contracts filmmakers. And at the moment, what we're looking for, we are prioritizing projects that amplify intersex, lesbian, and transgender voices, who are our most marginalized constituencies. And we support also advocacy campaigns or legal reform efforts, and as well as increasing public visibility in under-resourced countries. And our under-resourced countries include Eswatini, Malawi, Zambia, and Angola. And what we don't fund, just to be clear, is commercial or entertainment projects with no advocacy or movement building angle, because mainstream media does not have a lot of space for us. So we try, and also we are accountable to funders and our donors as well. So that's why we stick to these conditions on what we would fund. And that's pretty much the work of the Other Foundation. We mostly fund, not just films, but we fund change. And if it would be interesting to collaborate with change makers that are in this meeting in the future, so that we can tell our stories, because like I said, mainstream media and many filmmakers do not focus on LGBT, especially African LGBTI stories that are untold. And we have so many good stories to tell, and we want to tell stories from a position of power and not always as victims and so on. And that's why the Other Foundation does the work that it does. And I wanted to also thank Mabatu for a special invitation to this. And I'm very privileged to be among change makers like all of you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Matuba. I mean, I think that Rafiki film did amazing work in Kenya.
Yes.
I don't know if you know that film. Yes, yeah.
I
So
actually I lived in Kenya, so at its first opening, I was there, so it was such a privilege to be there.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah, amazing work you're doing. Do you want to show us anything? No. Do you have any films examples? No.
I didn't bring any, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Okay. Thank you so much, Matuba. And Kim, can we call on Kim? Kim Hendricks, she's the chartered accountant. He's going to talk to us about possible tax breaks and how NGOs and filmmakers can work to make it to make the funding go further. Are you there,
Cool.
Kim?
Thanks, Karin. Can you maybe enable my screen sharing? Okay, cool. I'm thinking you can now see my screen. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Unfortunately, I don't have a film to share with you. It's not as exciting, but I've got some pictures. Okay, so yeah, I'm going to talk to you briefly about, I guess, the tax considerations to take into account when filmmakers are collaborating with NGOs. I think the main ones really is that an NGO can have a tax-exempt status, which means that their income wouldn't be subject to tax. But I think maybe more importantly is that the donor, so the person indirectly or directly funding the NGO, indirectly funding the film project, may be eligible for a deduction of that that donation, essentially providing them with a tax credit, which essentially I think makes the funding of the film more attractive. And you know, if you're dealing with someone that would have funded or would have donated anyway, you know, if it is deductible, essentially they can contribute more at the same cost, essentially, right? So there's a couple of sort of requirements that, you know, you may want to just be aware of for yourselves and to maybe just check with the NGO that you're collaborating with as well. Generally, you know, the tax consequences stem from the transaction. So in this case, it's the structure of the project or the partnership that's going to dictate the tax outcome or the tax consequence, okay? And essentially the desirable outcome is that your donor or your funder qualifies for a deduction so that, you know, this whole situation can kind of be quite attractive. I'm sure there's many ways that, you know, possible structures to this partnership, I think some of which have already been spoken about. So you can have an NGO commissioning the film, or it can be a sort of filmmaker-led project, and then they sort of approach the NGO. There's probably some other possibilities as well. A sort of important point or sort of requirement that's going to need to be met in order for us to get this deduction, or the donor or the funder to get this deduction, is that the donor needs to fund the NGO, and then the NGO funds the filmmaker. The donor can't fund the filmmaker directly, okay? Because if they do that, they're going to lose the deduction, essentially. Additionally, then, the NGO, in order for the donor to get this deduction, the NGO needs to be a public benefit organization, so a PBO, as well as have Section 18A approval. Now, many NGOs, most NGOs would meet the requirements to be a PBO and to get the Section 18A approval, which is sort of registrations and approvals that's gotten from SARS, but may have just not gone through the process. Right, so a PBO is basically a non-profit entity that engages primarily in public benefit activities, right? What we've been speaking about here today. And that sort of entity can also then apply to get Section 18A approval, which is what is required for this donor to get the deduction. Now, while the NGO may meet these requirements, you know, sort of classification as a PBO and 18A approval is not automatic, right? So it requires application to an approval by SARS. So it's something that if you are going to collaborate with an NGO, it's a question that you want to ask. Are they a PBO? Do they have Section 18A approval? And, you know, if they do, great. If they don't, maybe it's something that you want to, you know, encourage because it is going to be good from a funding point of view. If you think about it, if someone was going to donate, you know, 100,000 Rand, essentially, depending on their tax bracket, they could get relief of 40,000 rand. So the net cash flow is then 60,000 rand, right? So it is quite attractive. And as I said, if someone was going to donate either way, it means that they have more real cash to essentially put into the project. Then understandably, the film needs to sort of support the NGO's public benefit activities, right? So be used by the NGO for education, advocacy, or like awareness purposes, or whatever it is, but it must be aligned, because there needs to be a link between the donation and the public benefit activity, right? In order for this donor to get this deduction. There probably are instances where, maybe there's a dual purpose. So, the NGO is going to use the film. Maybe it's going to be screened at whichever festivals. Maybe there's a slight commercial purpose to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that the donations, the deduction is going to be lost completely. Probably is a little bit more difficult to prove. And there's possibly going to be some apportionment that needs to take place. So documentation is probably going to be quite key there. And I think generally, with respect to tax, whether it's, the NGO, whether it's the donor, whether it's you as the filmmaker, documentation and retention of documentation is important, right? So at the beginning of the project, a sort of clear agreement between the NGO and the filmmaker outlining the roles of the parties, what the funds are going to be used for, the various responsibilities and whose responsibilities those are and such things. Probably good to have that drafted. And then throughout, we want to kind of keep records of funds used, right? So invoices, receipts, bank statements, all of that sort of stuff is good to keep for the purposes of this deduction. But I think then also, for your purposes as well, right? So if you receive income from the NGO and you're incurring costs, those could be deductible in your personal capacity as well. So retention of records, bit of a loss, but it is necessary to get the tax benefit, or to prove that you are entitled to the tax benefit. So yeah, that's it from me. Happy to take any questions.
Karin, just a short announcement. Unfortunately, Matuba has had to jump to another meeting, but he has said that he would like to find ways to collaborate with the DFA. So that's quite exciting to have that opportunity for filmmakers, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Excellent. Are there any questions for Kim while we're talking about tax? Oh, there's a question for Kim. Do you know if a cooperative enterprise has the same benefit status as an NGO PBO? That's from Laura Taylor.
It can. It doesn't necessarily need to be a particular, like a company, for example. But if it meets the requirements, like there's a definition of a public benefit organization. It is generally just a non-profit orientated entity, whether that be a company, a trust, a group of individuals, that carries on public benefit activities, right? But again, it's not automatic. You'd need to sort of formally apply to SARS and get approval for that.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Any other questions for Kim? No, not at the moment. For anybody else, please put your questions in the chat.
Sorry, my hand was up, but I don't think you can
sorry,
see
I didn't see it. Didn't see it.
Yeah. Hi, thanks, Kim. I feel like I'm having post-tax week PTSD talking about tax issues here today, but thank you. It's very mindful to have this as part of the conversation, because it's something that often terrifies us as filmmakers. I just wanted to check, when you were talking now about the 18A for NPOs and NGOs, are you talking about that in relation to them being able to offer that to their funders who could then potentially fund your film? So the 18A would be coming through the NPO. Is that the context of this? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's essentially for the indirect funders, right? So the people that are donating to the NGO and indirectly sort of funding the film, kind of thing. So it's an incentive to fund the film project, is what it is.
So just my follow-up question. So I guess a strategy for a filmmaker, if there is a funder who potentially has money to fund a film, is to find an NPO partner who's working in that field, who might want to accept the money so that that funder can have also a benefit, a tax benefit from giving that money.
Yes, correct. That would definitely be a way, right? So they'd have a tax benefit, or as I said, if they want to contribute X amount, it means that that X amount would indirectly turn into a greater amount if they're able to get the inflow of the tax benefit.
That's an interesting thought for us to hold on
Yeah.
to. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's really great. So as filmmakers, we can raise the money and then find, like you say, an NGO or NPO that can work with us, and then also get our network bigger. So very nice idea. Just a question in terms of finding characters for you guys who are making films out there. One of the struggles I've had working with NGOs is how often they want to push forward like their very boring CEO that does not make a film character. How do you navigate that space? Like, how do you deal with the dynamics of the egos within the NGO? Doesn't seem like there are any egos in the NGOs we're talking to today, but I think there are a lot out there in the world. And how do you navigate that? Jacqueline, do you want to answer? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to just have a go at that. I think it's always about prioritizing story, and if you can convince an NGO or the organization you're working with that the value of having a powerful speaker on camera and not the CEO, not the director, but someone and really just prioritizing why having a certain character or someone who's much better on screen or who can talk well will be so much better to tell a story. And I think if people understand when story makes you feel something and when you have that impact, then if they can see that and understand that, then they'll be like, okay, I can let go of my ego. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, nice.
I think if I can jump in as well, what I generally do is to ask organizations, what would you like this film to do? Who would you like to show it to? Where would you like to see it? And then based on that, figure out the kind of film they're envisaging. Are they hoping for a film that's going to be on festivals? Or is it a kind of an internal tool where everybody in the room has to hear from everybody else in the room? And so you have to gauge what it is that they're looking for. And if they are looking for a film that's going to be a narrative, creative film that maybe has a festival or broadcast live, then I think one has to gently, I mean, sometimes they don't want to be in the film, but I think it's understanding what it is what the partnership requires.
I just wanted to ask Kim, I know last year we were looking at how we could make the DFA into a PBO as opposed to an NGO so we could access all this tax funding, money, but there was some issue, I'm not quite sure what it was, something to do with SARS, and I don't know if they allow arts and culture organizations, or do you know, there was some reason that we couldn't become a PBO as opposed to an NPO.
Yeah, listen, I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly. I'd have to look a bit more into also what you do and all of those things to be able to tell you like what the requirement was. But are you saying you applied through like by submitting
No,
a form to SARS?
DFA is an NPO, so we have an NPO number and all of that. And we did want to apply for the PBO status, but then there was something that SARS, I can't remember exactly the reason was, but there was SARS didn't allow DFA as an organization to be a PBO. Don't know if it was about something to do with was it our constitution or or to do with arts and culture. I'm not quite sure because obviously one can access far more funding for the organization through a PBO status as opposed to an NPO. So I was just wondering if you knew what the parameters were when it comes to like the Documentary Filmmakers Association and becoming a PBO as opposed to an NPO.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely have a look at it. I'd need to have a look at, what you guys do specifically as well in a bit further depth. Yeah.
And Mabata's answered that question. She said it was the writing of our constitution.
Is it?
Our focus is, yeah.
Can we ask Aletta to unmute and turn on your camera and join the conversation with your question?
Thank you. Yeah. No, I was just listening to this and wondering, obviously we all would love to make powerful films for NGOs all day long, but we want to also keep the lights on. So I was just wondering, is it possible to create a separate arm of your production operations that is classed as a PBO that does specifically this kind of work, in the public interest or for environmental good or whatever? Is that possible? And would it be worthwhile?
I think like you can have a dual purpose, but I think to get the PBO status, like so you do have PBOs that would be maybe have a trading element as well, but it's got to be primarily your objective has got to be primarily relating to public benefit activities. So it probably would be a little bit more difficult. But as I said, if you you get the sort of funding from the NGO and you collaborate there, and you also use the film for other purposes, then you probably would be able to access, or the donor probably would be able to access a portion of the donation. So maybe not, or the deduction, sorry, maybe not 100%. It may need to be a portion, but you would be able to access some of it. So if you're still collaborating with the NGO, but then you maybe use it for a dual purpose.
Okay, so at the moment I have a business, right? A very young business, but I'm just I noticed another production company on Instagram that have formed this sort of separate arm, more like a foundation. I mean, is there some kind of financial incentive to that, tax incentive or otherwise?
Not, I mean, again, not for you as an individual, but for the donors. But I mean, I think the other thing that just to take note, I mean, in your company, right, there can be income, but then it's also like costs and things like that would generally be deductible as well from a tax perspective, which I think is why it's also quite important to keep like extensive records of all expenditure, which I would imagine is quite a lot. So yeah, what I'm saying is you shouldn't be paying a lot of taxes essentially, like, so you should be getting quite a bit of relief through expenditure as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else want to ask a question? I can't see hands up.
I can maybe also just respond to Aletta's question, not from a tax, but from just a filmmaker's perspective. So you're right, a lot of people do that. I think you need to be very clear on your purpose for doing that. Because if you are doing the kind of work that you could validate as being an NPO, then you do have the potential of accessing funding, which you can't as a production company. So a lot of people have done that, but then it's a whole other administrative ball game, and you need a board, and so you need to be very clear on why you want to do it. You can't just do it because you want to fund your films. You need to have a bigger strategy and a bigger reach, I think.
Thanks, Miki.
Hi. Thanks everybody for the contributions. I just wanted to find out there's different ways of working. Obviously, as a filmmaker now, we know that possibly if we have a story or a theme, we could collaborate with an NPO and perhaps work the funding for that. But as impact campaigns, I have attended some of the impact campaign webinars as well. But Miki and others that have worked, at what point do you collaborate with? Do you handle all the impact campaign yourself, or do you collaborate with somebody who's responsible for that impact campaign, the follow on from the production of the film. I mean, we did one where we made the film and then we raised funding through the PSP, and we used that money then to go to communities and show it, like that. And we did research, and that then the impact, that was as far as the impact we got, and then I just was wondering how to take it beyond that. Do you work with somebody else and extend it? Because your life as the filmmaker, then you have to go off and do something else. How does it work for you?
I think it's the first partnership is really the people, the activists. If you're doing a film with activists, it's the activists in the film, the organization, who you're making the film about and or for. And those will be your primary impact partners, because your impact, the film's impact objectives are closely linked to the narrative and also to the work that they're doing, because the narrative is inevitably going to be talking about that work. So those are your partners, and of course, whether you as a filmmaker become the impact producer or bring on another person to drive the impact campaign, both those scenarios are possible. I think as a filmmaker, it's unlikely that you're going to extract yourself if you have made a film for impact, because you clearly have a passion. You become entwined in the subject matter and you care deeply about it. But I think that if you have a good partnership in place with the organizations already doing the work, there comes a point where you can step back and let them run with it, because they're going to have a purpose for the film. And so then it can fly, and people will use the film and you'll use the film, but it will have a life that's much bigger than the filmmaker. That's I don't know if Jacqueline has a different answer to that.
I mean, I can add to that. I think, as Miki said, you're deeply involved in the film and you want to see where the impact is, but then there's obviously a new project and you need to move on. And I think sometimes, obviously having an impact producer that can take that work further is one idea, and raising some money for that to happen. But I do think that those strategic partnerships with NGOs that are part of the film or have an interest in the film, they would want to continue it. So for Temperature Rising, which was actually, it's set between two of the climate change conferences, which was in 2020, COP26 and COP27, and now we're already on COP30 and beyond. But there's a number of partners that we've created partnerships with, who are saying, can we use the film to show at this event? And that is, so it continues to have a life because it has value to those organizations, because it can be useful for them as an advocacy tool. Even though it's telling a story about a few years ago, it has that life. And now we just get requests for it to be screened, and we're not necessarily doing much of the impact work. They're taking it on for themselves.
That makes sense. So they'll take on so if they want to go to COP, for example, and screen it there, that funding of that part of the process is something that they take on themselves. Is that correct?
And they're using the film now as a tool for their own work, for whatever campaign they're wanting to do. So and then it's on them for doing the work, organizing the audience, whatever it is. But there it is as a tool when you've made it, because you've created that sort of partnership with them.
Yeah, great. That makes sense. Thank you. Thanks very much.
And Connie and Margaret, do you want to speak about how you did the impact campaign?
I think, echoing what everyone has said, for us, the impact was it was integrated into our planning for the year. And so it was very clear that we wanted to make sure the film went as far as it could go, particularly in the communities that we wanted to see the film. And so it was really built into our planning as women. And that it was our responsibility as the organization to make sure that it traveled as far as it could go. I don't know, Connie, if you want to add.
Yeah, just picking up on what Jacqueline was saying, we've shown it at universities, schools, primary schools. There was interest throughout. We also use it as an advocacy tool, campaign, movement building. So it's been quite a powerful tool, as a visual storytelling tool for us organizationally.
Alec, do you have a question?
Putting me on the spot.
Come. You've been thinking about this for weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe for the women panel, in terms of, obviously funders out there are interested in making an impact, and I guess there's different things that people fund, and to what extent, do people still see the value of a film in creating impact? Are funders willing to increasingly fund films, or do they not see the value of it maybe so much? Hopefully they do.
I'll jump in with just an idea that I was thinking about. There's so many organizations, so many NGOs in this country and in the region, and all doing really important work on so many different aspects. And more, I see that they're needing to find ways to tell the stories of their work in new ways. They're done, PowerPoint presentations and reporting. People don't want to do it in the sort of old ways, and they see the value of film. And this is, I guess, maybe more for shorter form stories. They really see that the value of it in fundraising, in reporting. And I think there seems like there's a lot of space for that. Maybe the film that you want to get on a festival and for it to have the accolades is not the same thing, but it's the storytelling and telling a story about impact of what an organization is doing. I think there's a lot of space, and just it's convincing people that reporting in a film format is a really powerful way to do it.
Yeah, and I'll say for because we work in climate justice, definitely with the certain funders, they've seen the value of visual storytelling, films, short form videos having an impact, and we're looking at impact storytelling. Yeah. So yes, there is funding out there. I mean, the funding pool has shrunk. I'm sure we all know that. But what's become, clear, say in newsrooms, that the weather is the news, the climate is the news. So they've definitely paid more attention to that. But however, with free media, independent media, it's also shrinking. So, NGOs are facing, like we've seen with, the States and USA, many people getting retrenched. So even in the NGO sector, there's people looking for work. The struggle is real. But I will say that there are certain funders that will send out a call out. It depends. I mean, they've all got different criteria, different regions, different countries, different demographics. So what you would need to do is keep a keen eye, join their mailing list, check their socials, approach them to maybe pitch to them. And they might have a small pool of funding, where you could collaborate and fund together to make your film, or, yeah. So that's what we've done. We've got funders, and we were able to make this film across 3 countries, and, the rollout and distribution. We're making another one in the Northern Cape around green extractivism, gas and hydrogen, copper mining, illegal mining happening on communal land there. So there is funding, but you've got to keep a keen eye out and be proactive. Do reach out to NGOs and civil society.
Yeah, I'm just interested to know which platforms do the women in mining and Jackie use, and which has been the most successful, like TikTok or YouTube, because the link was YouTube is, and do you tend to put it out for free? But just really, which platforms do you find have been the most successful for you to reach your audience?
Well, for us, because we work a lot with community women, we're finding that WhatsApp, using a low-res version of the film, gets more reach and engagement. But we use YouTube. events, regional exchanges. Funds for NGOs is a good platform to look for funding. Some of us paid. You've got to be on a paywall. But if you check out funds, for NGOs, that's one of the big ones, I would say.
And have you had huge audiences? What's the most watched videos you've had? Like how many people have viewed it?
I haven't checked the analytics lately. I don't know, Max, if you've checked, but we've had a phenomenal response to the film from funders, from media, communities, other civil society organizations. I mean, I think we did community screenings and we had a questionnaire afterwards at community screenings. But I can't give a qualitative response to that. I have to double check that. It's been wide.
And
Yeah.
I guess for us with Temperature Rising, it's sitting on YouTube and on Vimeo, but it's not freely available because what we really wanted was that it's not just a film we wanted people to watch and then like turn off and then go, I don't know, like go do something else. We were very keen, and it was really important that when people watch the film, they're engaged in a discussion, in a dialogue, there's a Q&A. So any organization that gets in touch with us, or an academic institution or a school or a res, we always say, sure, you can have the film, you can screen it for free, and who can be there to help host the questions, or one of us, or someone we know, or someone from Sunshine Cinema, so that it's housed in a discussion that gets people to kind of help see the connections of their own life to the issue. And Temperature Rising is really about the climate crisis. So for us, it's freely available, but we really want it to be something that takes people to some kind of action. So that's kind of how we've done it with our film.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty covered, but I think what Connie mentioned about the WhatsApp is really important for us, because the majority of the women that we work with do have access to WhatsApp, whether it might not be in their own home, but in the community, there is at least one person that has a smartphone. So we went to a lot of effort to have a low-res version of the film that we could just distribute by WhatsApp and share. And I think that's made it difficult for us to really measure that kind of reach, because we wanted the film to just get out. So just share it in all of your groups, share it as widely as possible. And then it becomes a little bit more difficult to track. But yeah, the point was that we wanted it to be accessible and free and easy for people to view on a small screen if they needed to.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Karin Slater, and I'm a student. I'm a documentary filmmaking student at Rhodes University. So I have two questions. So as a student, what would you encourage a student who's interested in working with NGOs to start doing while they are a student? What tips could you give? What insights could you provide with regards to that?
Anyone got tips?
I can jump first and then someone else can go. I think that if you're wanting to work with an NGO and you know which NGO you want to work with, or they're dealing with issues that you are interested in, is look at what campaigns they're doing, look at what their goals are, and figure out if you can create a story or you have an idea that aligns with what they're doing. So if it's something very specific that you see there's, because then if you want to work with them and you say, I've got an idea, say it's about disability rights, and you're wanting to speak to an NGO that you know that they're doing something, you can create a story that aligns with what they're already doing. They're much more likely to go, this is amazing. It's about our campaign that we're rolling out next year. So just checking what they're up to will really help you figure out if that's a story you want to work with them on. That's one way of doing it.
And I think I can just add to that. I was going to say exactly what Jackie just said, but I think also while you're a student and you have potentially got access to free equipment, and you also have projects that you need to do for your student projects, maybe connect with an NGO that's accessible to you and that you care about, and offer to make a film for them as a student project. So they don't necessarily have money to pay you, but you feel committed to their work and you offer yourself and your skill as a filmmaker to make a film for them. And this develops you as a filmmaker. It gives them a tool, and it also, once you graduate and you actually need to start making films and generate an income, you have an NGO film in your CV. So it's a learning experience, and it's a way of exchanging with whatever the NGO is that you work with.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
excellent.
think from our side, we've got our annual plan set from, the beginning of the year. So that plan is set and budgets are allocated. However, even in my experience fundraising for, films, my previous films, it's always good to ask. You may be scared and uncertain and maybe not know. But I think the important bit is that you ask, say like, hi, this is me. What are you guys up to? I'm keen on, trying to collaborate. These are some of my ideas, when you're pitching to an NGO, but have a clear plan, I would say. Because we get approached constantly, and I'm the person that has to look at it because I'm the film person on the team, and um, everybody has their story, wants to tell their story, but with an NGO, those plans are set, and sometimes as well when we would like to see how we can accommodate certain requests if it aligns with our work, and especially if it's coming from a young emerging filmmaker, we would be keen, a young Black emerging filmmaker, a woman, because we're an eco-feminist organization alliance. So just be active and just go and say, hey, this is me. Doors will open. And I think it's something, a skill, like as a filmmaker, as an emerging filmmaker, is to ask the question and offer your services if, you're passionate about something. That's really important. That, in our storytelling, that we constantly ask, and ask those that, where power and money resides, go to them.
Great, thank you, Connie. And I also think as a student, you have skills that a lot of people don't have. And you might not think that they're skills, but like being able to make somebody who's grown up with digital, in the digital world, for you to make a story is like nothing for you. Whereas for some people that are in the workspace, it's a huge job and don't know how to do it. And so you can offer your skills to help people with their social medias, and then open up communication that way to try and get into the NGO space. And I like what Miki said as well, offer your services to make a film for them as part of one of your projects for your university degree. So yeah, there's lots. I mean, when I used to teach, people used to pair up with NGOs all the time and make incredible films. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of space there. Are there any more questions, or are we ready to wrap it up? Alette, how are you feeling there?
Yeah, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I did remember though that Zipo said that she had 2 questions.
Oh
So
yes, that's true.
yeah.
Sipo, are you still there?
Kim, I think she actually must have lost connection because it got cut off a little bit just now, earlier on, and it's disappeared. She was breaking up
Okay.
earlier, so she might have
Yes, I
lost.
see she's no longer with us. Yeah. Okay.
I'll just make a comment, Karin.
Yeah, sure. Go,
I was
Miki.
just listening to Roman, the way you've really activated that film, and I think that's really amazing and commendable, because I've also seen sometimes organizations commission films and then nothing happens to it. And that can be quite disheartening. But this film, I've seen it around for so many years, and it keeps popping up, and it's always somewhere. And I think that's really fantastic that there's also not a time limit to how long a film can be used and seen. whether it's on a big screen or on a WhatsApp, I think it's amazing the way you've really integrated your work with film as a communication tool.
Yeah, lovely. I love that WhatsApp idea.
Thank you, Miki. Thank you.
Okay, great. Can we wrap it up?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. Next week, we have another webinar, particularly academics and a critical approach to streamers, which seems appropriate given the recent news. So please join us for that as well. Tiny Munge will be hosting that. So I'm sure she's going to fire everybody up and get some hard questions out there. So that will be exciting. Yeah.
And then it's with people from the academic space that have studied.
That's right. We have we've got Professor Susanda Nkwala from UWC. We've got a academic from Brussels and someone from Brazil who's particularly going to talk about the impact on the industry in Brazil of streamers. So please join us for that.
Well, it sounds excellent. Thank you so much, Alette, and thank you so much for what you're doing and all the DFA board for all your hard work. And I can advise all of you on the screen, on the call here, to put your hand up and get involved in the DFA. There's amazing work, amazing networking, and we can support each other through these rough times. It's like having a therapist without one having to pay for it. So yeah, it's definitely an organization to get involved in. So yeah, all the best and have a good evening. And thanks so much, Alette and team.